Well, let's take a quick look in 1 Peter, and Danny always reminds me when we have a short crowd to speak longer. Is that what you say? He said his famous line is, you don't give the whole load to one cow. You know, you kind of cut it short. So I'll be mindful of that. Okay. So I want us to look at, again, at 1 Peter. We're going to be looking at about verse 15, 16, 17, something like that. We started this section last week with the word therefore, and he's been describing up until the therefore, the wonderful salvation we have and how what a gracious gift God has given to us. And he told us to be mindful, set our minds for action, be self-controlled, be alert. And then he says in verse 15, but just as he who has called you is holy, so be holy in all that you do, for it is written, be holy because I am holy. And for a lot of my time, I haven't done it in quite a while here, but I talk a lot about this idea of holiness. And I use 3 principles to holiness, and I want to remind you of them briefly. And one of them he states right here, just as he who called you is holy. Who's he talking about? Jesus, God. And if you read the Old Testament scriptures, you can't miss it, that God is holy. And what does the word holy mean? He's set apart. He's different. He's sinless. He's righteous. He's pure. He's way beyond us in every way. He is holy. And there's nothing that can change his holiness. And we have said all along it's because of his holiness that he cannot tolerate or be near or touch anything that has sin in it. His holiness will not allow him to be involved in sin. But the second principle I'll talk about is that the only way anything else can ever become holy is that God makes it to be holy. Nothing could ever be holy except God make it to be holy. So in the Old Testament, did God ever make anything to be holy? Did he ever set anything apart for a special purpose? Well, did he set apart a piece of ground? A mountain? So when Moses is getting really curious about a fire that won't go out and won't move from one location to another, he finally goes up on the side of this mountain to see what is going on. And when he gets near, he's told what? Take off your shoes because this is what? This is holy ground. How did it become holy? God's presence. God set it apart. God made it to be holy. And so in the Old Testament, you talk about a temple that was in the vision, in the mind of David, built by his son Solomon, and it was called a holy place because it was a place where God lived. It was set apart for God. It was holy. In the Old Testament, we talk about a people who were God's holy people. Who were those people? The Jews, the Israelites, the Hebrews, the children of Jacob, the children of Israel. They were set apart. They were called holy. So in the New Testament, you move into the New Testament, and God also has chosen a people to be holy, to be set apart, to be different, to be even peculiar to this world, to not be conformed to this world, but to be transformed by the renewing of their minds. Who did he choose in the New Testament to be holy? Who did he make to be holy? All of us who have been obedient to the story of Jesus, to the good news of Jesus. He made us to be holy. Now what he expects, here's rule number 3, is whatever God has made to be holy, he expects us to do what? Keep it holy. Be mindful of our holiness. So he says, be holy Because I am holy. Just as he who called you is holy, be holy in all that you do. Be set apart and be different. Now, is that easy to do? As we've said over and over again, is that easy to do? No. It's not easy to do, because while we're trying to live holy and set apart and different lives, we're set in the midst of what? A very unholy world and a very difficult world. I'll end up talking about a little bit about Sunday as we're making our way into John. But we were sitting over here a moment ago and we were talking about the world of teaching, the profession of teaching, and how it's so very difficult right now. Why would it be difficult right now?
All the cultural influences that are taking hold.
Okay, all the cultural influences have taken hold, and these cultural influences have been so massively spread that you've got little tiny children who are saying words that you and I would not dare say, and they do not even understand there's a thing wrong with it. And so you can call it to their attention, and you can tell them that they're going to be in trouble for it, and they can't even figure out why you're saying it. It's very common. Although I talked to our daughter this morning, and she said, Dad, we went to Kerrigan's first basketball game last night, and they were playing a town called Amherst, Texas. Now, when you go out west of Lubbock and northwest of Lubbock, you got all kinds of little tiny towns. And Amherst is one of the little towns that hardly anything is left. She said, we walked in to the school building and walked toward this gymnasium that had to be built in the 20s or something like that. And on the walls, all over the walls as you walk down, are big plaques, big banners with Bible verses on it. It's like you're walking into Sunday school. And we asked about it, and they said, we still do that in these small West Texas towns. And of course, they're kind of the opinion nobody's going to tell them to do differently. You know, but that's not the normal. That's not the normal. So here we are trying to live right now holy lives in a very unholy world. And it is very, very difficult. So difficult, in fact, that sometimes I fail at it. And sometimes you fail at it. Am I right? And yet here's what he's about to say. This is the great news. Because he who is holy is also love. So if we were going to turn over here a little farther and we're going to look at the book of 1 John, and we read the book of 1 John, not the Gospel of John, but 1 John, the theme that you would find in 1 John, and someday we may do this. I've done it before. I've said, okay, I want, all we're going to do is read this morning. And I'm going to read everything out of 1 John as though we're all tied together that says anything about love. And it's amazing. And one line will be, God is love. So God is holy, but God is love. And which of the two is stronger of his characteristics? Well, they're equal. He's just as holy as he is loving. But because he's loving and because he's holy, he had to figure out a way whereby he could look at us, whom he made in his own image. And I'm still trying to figure out exactly what that means. I don't think I'll ever figure out exactly what that means. But he had to figure out a way that we who are made in his own image, and we who have messed up and we become like this world, and so he has to be separated from us, he's got to figure out a way whereby he can be reconnected to us. How he can embrace us again. Because if we're just stained with sin all over, he can't embrace us because of his holiness. And yet his love compels him to want to. So what did he do? How did he satisfy this dilemma?
He sent Jesus.
He sent Jesus. He sent Jesus. So listen to this, and we'll stop. We'll stop early, but listen to this. For you know it was not with perishable things, such as silver or gold, that you were redeemed from the empty way of life handed down to you from your forefathers. Now, he's probably making reference there to the Jews, but even if you're not a Jew, you had an empty way of life that was handed down to you if you did not know God. You weren't redeemed by perishable things like silver or gold, but with the precious blood of Christ, a lamb without blemish or defect, a lamb that was what, by the way? Holy. Because if you heard anything we said Sunday morning, in the very first 3 verses of John, Jesus is what? He is God, and He is Creator. He was holy. He was chosen, now watch this, He was chosen before the creation of the world. Isn't that interesting? Jesus was chosen before the creation of the world. Why would He go ahead and create it? If He knew already what He was going to have to do for all of us, who He made from a bunch of dirt, but God desires a relationship with us. This God who has always been, always will be, desires a relationship. So before the creation ever started, God will in the garden show us what He wants, the perfection He wants, the relationship He wants, knowing all the while that we would be tempted by this world and by Satan, who hates God and therefore who hates us. He knew we would be tempted. He knew we would fall. He knew that our sin would separate us from Him. So before it ever got started, He said, I won't let it last. I'm going to get a way whereby I can have people with me again, as it was in the very beginning. So before the creation of the world, He was chosen, but He wasn't revealed until these last times for our sake. And through Him, you believe in God who raised Him from the dead and glorified Him, and so your faith and your hope are in God. So now that you have purified yourselves by obeying the truth, we'll stop there because you're going to go into the subject of love. But you have purified yourselves by what? By obedience. By believing He is. And by following through with what He asks us to do. You see how it all ties together? It's so interesting to me. This is exactly what we learn, and we'll keep learning in the Gospel of John we're going to study. It's what we learn in the book of Romans. It's what we learn in the book of Acts. The subject is always the same. And so you may wonder, well, why do we keep talking about it? Why do we take this time on Wednesday night? We come back and rehearse the same thing. Because I find that we have to be reminded over and over and over again of things that are important. Is that true for you? You got to get reminded over and over and over again. Because I get busy and busy and busy, and I get pulled here and here and here, and I have to get reminded. And we're all busy. I mean, I'm glad to see Ben here on a Wednesday night. But Ben normally can't do that because Ben legitimately has a massive job. Gone all summer on a combine and gets back just in time to get on a cotton machine. I don't know if they call it a stripper or a picker. I don't know. It just gets rid of the cotton off the stalk. But I'll guarantee you, if it hadn't snowed, he would be forced to get over these thousands and thousands and thousands of acres that they do. Right? If it hadn't snowed? And we get busy. And we get to concentrate on the fact that it's broken down again, or this. And we get, I don't know, life just works that way. And so we get reminded. And what we're reminded of is God's holiness, God's love, God's gift, our salvation because of it, and who we are and who we're supposed to be and how we're supposed to live. Sounds so simple and just hard to do.